أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. So please excuse my sniffling and coughing in between the dars, but I've had a really bad flu the last week, and I didn't want to leave this dars because I was counting, and I think we have about maybe 5 or 6 more durus before Ramadan, before we stop for Ramadan. And I'm trying very hard to finish the Meccan period, because the Seerah is divided into Meccan period and Medina period. And the Medina period is quite heavy and it's quite long, but I wanted to at least get through the Meccan period if I can, inshallah, or at least most of it. So that's what inshallah I'm trying to aim to do right now. So if you remember last time, we were speaking in detail about Khadija radiallahu anha, and I wanted to give you a feel of what kind of person she was, and for you to understand why the Prophet married her and why he lived with her very happily for a long period of time without wanting to marry anybody else, and why even after she passes away, he thinks of her fondly, he misses her. Anyone related to her is very, very important and dear to him. So if we continue to carry on with where we had stopped last time, we will still speak a little bit more about Khadija radiallahu anha and her position in his life. So if you remember last time, I think we stopped at we were just starting to say that he was married, they were happily married, everything was going all right. She bore him his 6 out of his 7 children. So one of his children was from one of the wives that he marries towards the end of his life, but all his other children are from Khadija radiallahu anha. Anybody knows all their names? The boys were Qasim and Abdullah, yes, and Ibrahim is the one that he has later on. And then his daughters? Yes. So Ruqayya, Kulthum, Zainab and Fatima. And Fatima was the youngest, and again the dearest to the Prophet ﷺ. She was like the apple of his eye, and he loved her dearly, and he used to say that she's a part of me and I'm a part of her, and if anything hurts her, it hurts me. So this is how much he was fond of her, and how strong his love for her was. So what would happen is, at that time we still haven't entered Islam, prophethood still hasn't come, but there was a small handful of people who they were repelled by shirk and these practices of idol worship and their superstitious values. They just didn't take too well to them. They didn't like them, so they just kept away from them, and they did their own form of worship of Allah, or you could say worship of Tawheed, the way that they could understand it. And I gave you examples of 1 or 2 people last time. I don't know if you remember one of the names. Yeah, Waraqa bin Nawfal was one of them. Zayd, very good, whoever said that. Zayd bin Nawfal, Zayd bin Nufail. So Zayd had a son later on, and his son was one of the Ashara Mubashirina bil Jannah, if you remember. I don't know if you recall, but I thought that was really amazing, and I was giving you the example that if you are righteous, then your actions will not only have a positive effect on your children, but also on your lineage, on your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. They will all benefit from your righteousness. So your righteousness is so important for the rest of your line of generations. And this is the fruits and the barakah of righteousness, of good actions, that it goes far and beyond your own imagination. And the story in Surah Al-Kahf. Sorry, I keep mixing up what I have told you, what I have told my other circle, but I don't know if I mentioned to you, but in Surah Al-Kahf, there's a story of these two orphans, and then there is a wall that Dhul Qarnayn, he fixes, and he says there is a treasure under it, and his parents were righteous. And the Mufassirin, they said that these are not their immediate parents. These were their forefathers, or their grandparents, or great-grandparents, So look at how those good actions are helping these children now, you see. So never underestimate any amount of righteousness that you have, any amount of sidq. A lot of it, well, all of it comes from inside to the outside in your actions. It's not just a matter of actions. I mean, actions a lot of people can do, but if inside is clean and pure, that's where it comes from, and it goes a long way. It's almost like a bright shining light, which lights the path for many people in front of you. So Zayd bin Nufail was one of the people. He would stand near the Kaaba and he would tell people, don't say, because they would say, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, illa. And they would put this condition, and they would mention those who are associated with Allah, Hubal and Lat and Uzza. So he would stand, and when they would say illa, he would say qat. He would say stop. Don't associate partners with Allah. Even though there was no Islam at that time, no prophethood. But you can see that there was only a small handful of people who were actually trying to keep away from this and worshipping Allah. It was, Makkah was drowned, the world was actually drowned in the depth of shirk and superstition and magic and sorcery and all kinds of bad and evil things. I told you there was prostitution, there was all sorts of sin and bad things going on. So the world was desperately in need of the light of prophethood. So similarly, and by the way, when Zayd bin Nufail passed away before prophethood, and he would pray and he would do whatever the way he could imagine that he wanted to just worship one Allah. He would just do whatever he could understand himself. And his son asked the Prophet ﷺ later on that what will be the outcome of my father on the Day of Judgment, and he said he will come on the Day of Judgment as an ummah, because he was on his own, but he was following the right straight path. So similarly, the Prophet ﷺ, I told you, he kept away from eating things that had been slaughtered for idols. He kept away from idol worship. He kept away from touching them, or having anything to do with anything immoral. Prostitution, loose women, nakedness, all these khamar, all these kind of things. And I think I told you at the beginning, right, he tried to attend a couple of parties where there was music, and he would keep falling asleep, and he thought this is a sign from Allah, so he kept away from it. So he would go into this, he would go out of Makkah to this cave, and he would sit there. He would take some of his belongings, some dates, some bread, some water, some milk, and take it up. And because he would spend a few days there, it's a very long trek all the way there, so he would go there and then he would stay there for a few days until he would sit there and reflect and remember Allah, think about Allah, do some salah the way he could think of what is the best way for him to worship Allah, because that they all knew Allah, they all knew that there is Allah, but they were just adding things onto Allah. So he kept doing this for about 6 months or so. So he would go, and Khadija radiallahu anha, she would stay at home, she would look after the children, and he would be gone for about a week, 10 days. Then he would come back. Then they would do their usual things. Then after a month or so, he would go back. Then she would stay with the kids. He would go do his ibadah. Then he would come back, meditate. One night, similarly to his habit, he was in his cave, he finished praying, and as soon as he finished praying, he noticed that there is a man standing at the entrance of the cave. Now, as we mentioned, you've seen where this cave is, right? That is the last place you expect to get a visitor, right? This is just not something on anyone's mind that they're thinking that some man is going to turn up. So the Prophet ﷺ is a bit shocked as it is. Now, if somebody does turn up in a place like that, you're expecting what? You're thinking either he's a jinn or something, or you're thinking that this is some traveler who's lost and he's come, maybe he's hungry, maybe he's lost, he wants to find out, how do I get from here to there, or something like that, right? So he looks at this guy expecting, that one of these kind of things. What request does this person make? He says, Iqra. So the Prophet ﷺ is a bit taken aback because he's thinking, read? He's thinking, what kind of a request is that? You turn up all of a sudden in this cave and you're telling me to read. The Prophet ﷺ is illiterate. He could not even write his own name. So he says to this man, he says, Ma ana biqari. He says, I cannot read. I do not know how to read. So now the angel Jibreel, this is Jibreel who has turned up at this cave, he came in the form of a man. And it is said that when he would take the form of a man, he would take the form of one of the most handsome men in Mecca. His name was Dihya al-Kalbi. And it is said about Dihya al-Kalbi that the Prophet ﷺ sent him to Sham once with with a message or with the duty to do da'wah or something like that. And it is said that when the women heard that Dihya is coming, they all gathered in their windows to look down, just to look at his beauty. This is how amazingly handsome Dihya was. So when Jibreel alayhi salam would take the form of a man, he would usually come in the form of Dihya al-Kalbi. So he comes in this form of this really handsome man, and he says to the Prophet ﷺ, Iqra, and the Prophet ﷺ says, I do not know how to read. He says, I don't know how to read. So he comes close to the Prophet ﷺ, and he embraces him, and he squeezes him. And he squeezes him to the maximum limit that he can squeeze him, and then he leaves him. Can you imagine? The Prophet ﷺ is sitting in this cave alone, and it's been his habit to do this, month after month, and now all of a sudden, this is happening. And then he releases him. And what does he say to him again? He makes the same request again. He says, Iqra. The Prophet ﷺ is shocked again, because he's thinking, I just told him, I don't know how to read. He says, Ma ana biqari. I don't know how to read. So he goes close to him again, and he embraces him, and he squeezes him to the maximum that he can squeeze him, and then he releases him. And he says to him a third time, Iqra. Again, the same thing happens, and the Prophet ﷺ says that I don't know how to read. And he does the same thing. This time, he squeezes him so hard. The Prophet ﷺ tells Khadija later on, he says that I felt like I'm about to die. It's almost like his eyes roll up. He squeezes him so tightly, and then he releases him, and then he says, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. And then he leaves. And the Prophet ﷺ is sitting in shock, and he's confused. He doesn't know what has happened, and on top of all that, he has just heard the most amazing set of words that he has ever heard in his life. It doesn't sound like any poetry that he has ever heard before. It doesn't sound like anything that he has ever, heard from anyone. This is the most, amazing thing he has heard. He doesn't know what has happened, and on top of that, he's left with these words which are like, ringing in his ears, and he's thinking, what is this? Anyway, he is really, really frightened now. So he gathers his things, he has his provision that he has brought with him. He packs everything up and he heads down the mountain to go back home. Goes down. As he is heading back, he hears a voice call out to him. As if what has happened already was not enough. He hears somebody say, Ya Muhammad, Anta Rasulullah. Ya Muhammad, Anta Rasulullah. Ya Muhammad, Anta Rasulullah. And the Prophet ﷺ, he stops and he turns around and he looks. And in every direction that he looks, left, right, front, behind him, he sees Jibreel in his real form sitting on a chair, covering the horizon. The whole entire horizon is blocked by Jibreel. And he sees 600 wings of Jibreel alayhi salam. And they are, like I said, they are just covering the entire horizon. Everywhere he just sees Jibreel alayhi salam and his wings. That's how massive Jibreel alayhi salam is. This is one of the greatest angels, one of the, you could say, the most senior angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when he sees this, and he looks around and he just sees Jibreel alayhi salam in his real form, he just faints. There's too much awe.
He doesn't know that it's Jibreel, right?
No, he doesn't know that it's Jibreel. But whatever he sees, there is so much awe and so much, it's so awesome. It's so grand. He can't even swallow it, and he just faints. And then after a little while, he comes back to his senses, and he picks up his things and he rushes back home before something else happens. And he's shaking by now, he's thinking that what is going on? And he goes back and he enters the house and he reaches his most beloved Khadija radiallahu anha. And she is so, you can imagine from the way you read about her, that this woman has a presence about her. She has a calm about her. She has some wisdom, some gentleness about her. And he goes to her, he sees her, and he says, Zammiluni, Zammiluni. He says, cover me, and he's shaking. Normally when somebody has had a really shaking experience and they're shivering, if you just cover them and hold them or embrace them, they just calm down. That just helps them to calm down. So she wraps him up in a sheet and sort of like a blanket, and I think she lies him down and she sits by his head, and she asks him, can you imagine, I'm just thinking most likely if this was a young wife, she would be screaming and shouting more than him by now, thinking, what happened? Why are you shaking? Why have you come back already? She's going to be more shaken up. But this woman has some, a gentle way of dealing with the situation. So she calms him down. Then she asks him, she sits by his head. She says, what happened? Because she's thinking, you go every, few weeks, you sit in the mountain, you come back, and everything is normal. What happened today? Why are you shaking like this today? So she asks him calmly, she says, what happened? And he explains to her, he says, I was praying in the cave, and then suddenly this man appeared in the door of the cave, and he said to me, read. He said, I said to him, I cannot read, so he squeezed me. Then he left me, and he said to me again, read. And I said to him, I cannot read. Then he squeezed me again, and then he left me. And then he said, the third time again, he said to me, read. And I said, I cannot read. So he squeezed me so hard. He said, I felt like I will be finished now. And then he released me, and then he recites the words that Jibreel alayhi salam recited. And he said, and then he recited, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqa al-insana min alaq, Iqra wa rabbuka al-akram, alladhi allama bil qalam, allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam. So she listens to it all. And he says to her, I fear for my life. I'm scared that something will happen to me. Because it's been, and then, he saw him again when he came out and he saw this huge thing in the sky. So he's thinking now that something might happen to him. At this point comes the wisdom and the hikmah and the intelligence of Khadija radiallahu anha, which is very different from anybody else that he would have had with him at this crucial time in his life. She says to him, when he says that he fears for himself, he thinks that something bad is going to happen, basically, right? She says, let me read what exactly she says so I don't misquote her. She says, no, Allah will never forsake you because of your righteousness. You support the needy, you help the poor, you are generous towards the guests. What happened to you cannot be from shaitan. Because the Prophet ﷺ, I told you, right, he was averse to sorcery, magic, jinn, shayateen, those kind of things. Now he's thinking that this might be something like that because this is something so unnatural, so strange and different. So he's thinking this is something supernatural. And she consoles him and reassures him that this is not from shaitan. You are a good person and something bad will not happen to you. And right now she is trying to psychologically calm him down, right? Because she needs to give him some comfort and bring his, his heartbeat back to normal and bring his, him back to normal. Because right now he's shaking, he's scared. But while she's doing that, she has not discarded the situation. Perhaps somebody else would have said, just don't go to this cave again. Maybe this was just, some jinn or something that turned up. Just forget about it. Don't think about it. Just don't go back to the cave. Right? A lot of people would handle it like that let's just forget about this and let's move on. Let's talk about something else now. But she doesn't do that. She gives the discussion its right. And she says, okay, you've had this problem. It's not from shaitan. But in her mind now, she's trying to think, what is the best way to deal with this? And now she's reflecting on the words he has received. And in those words, there is mention of Rabb, there is mention of creation, there is mention of things which have something to do with Allah. So she's thinking now that the best way to resolve this would be to see, yes?
Would they have known the meaning of those words then?
They knew Rabb is Allah, and they knew the meanings of the words, but they did not know some terms such as Nabi or Rasul. They would not have known what that is. So she thinks of Waraqa. Why? Because he was a scholar who used to write portions of the Bible. So she knew that he has some religious knowledge. And this looks like some situation which needs some religious attention. Okay, so she thinks that, she says to the Prophet ﷺ, she says, all right, let me take you to Waraqa. He was her cousin. He was the son of her uncle. And so she takes him to Waraqa. Now Waraqa had become very, very old and he had become blind. But at the time that he had eyesight, he used to write portions of the Bible. So he was familiar with divine words. Of course, we know that the Bible and the Torah, they have been, interfered with and messed around with. But still, he had tasted a flavor of some words that were really, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he asks the Prophet ﷺ that what happened. And the Prophet ﷺ tells him how he's sitting in the cave and how this beautiful man appears, and he tells him to read, and he squeezes him, and then he recites these words, and he recites the words to Waraqa. As soon as Waraqa hears those words, he knows that these words are divine. They are not from a human being or a person or a jinn or anything like that. And he says to the Prophet ﷺ, he says that this is the same namus, meaning the angel, who used to come to Musa alayhi salam, because he's familiar with it again because of the previous scriptures. And he says a very interesting thing to the Prophet ﷺ. He says, I wish I was young. He says, and I wish I was young when your people will drive you out of your land. So the Prophet ﷺ's ears prop up when he hears this. He says, what do you mean that they will drive me out of my land? Why would they drive me out of my land? You know, in Makkah at that time, they were a tribal community. You're in the middle of dry desert. The only way you can survive is by sticking to each other. So they had very, very strong tribal bonds. If you belong to a certain tribe, everybody will protect you and nobody can come and touch you, because if they touch you, that means that whole tribe is going to be at war with you. That's how they were. The Prophet ﷺ belonged to one of the most noble tribes in Makkah. He said, I am the one who looks after their amana. This is how much they trust me. I am the one who put the black stone in the Kaaba. I am the one who is from one of the most noble families in Makkah. He's saying, why would they drive me out? And he says, I have no quarrel with anybody. He didn't. You know, he had no problem. Nobody had a problem with him and he had no problem with anybody. So he's trying to think that, why? Why would they throw me out? And then Waraqah tells him, he says, anyone who comes with a message like yours is driven out of his land. And he's driven out of his land and they take him as an enemy. And of course, you know, Waraqah had studied history. He knew what happens when truth and falsehood collide. This is what happens, right? And these words that Waraqah said to Khadija radiallahu anha and the Prophet ﷺ, Khadija radiallahu anha, as she left Waraqah's dwelling, she knew that the rest of the path that they were going to tread was going to be very, very tough and difficult. It's almost like he had foretold them that a lot of hardship was coming their way now when they start doing what they have to do. And Waraqah told the Prophet ﷺ, he said that you are a messenger just like Musa alayhi salam was a messenger. And again, you know, these are new terminology and new words that they are hearing. So he had to explain to them what a Nabi is, what a Rasul is, especially to Khadija radiallahu anha. And then they, you know, they understood, they got some idea of what is happening.
So they have idea of Musa alayhi salam, Isa alayhi salam that time?
They probably didn't have that much of an idea. They had some idea, but Waraqah knew a bit more in detail because he had been writing the scriptures. He had been reading the stories. But for example, the Prophet ﷺ, he was illiterate. He would never have read unless somebody would have said something to him or told him. He would not have known. Now, before we proceed, I want to explain a few things to you and just talk a little bit about the first word that is revealed, which is Iqra. And Iqra in Arabic, it means a number of things. Mostly, it means read. But to the Prophet ﷺ, when it's being said to him, it does not mean read, it means recite. But that word for us as an ummah, it means read. Okay? And I think it sums up in a way what we are supposed to be as an ummah. We are supposed to be a scholarly ummah. We are supposed to be educated. We're supposed to give importance to knowledge, to learning, to spending time reading. The more you read, the more you benefit, the more you learn. And of course we have to qualify that because there's a lot of things to read. But everything is not beneficial, right? But the main thing is that those first words, they transformed the Muslim community because literacy was not very common at that time. So the Prophet ﷺ was not literate, But so were lots of other people. There were a few people who were literate. But the majority of people, they did not give much importance to reading and writing and learning. But once this came, and once Islam was established, it changed everything. And Islam gave a lot of importance, a lot of stress on obtaining knowledge, on learning, on reading, on being a literate community. If you look at some of the the people who have come out of this Islam, you look at some of the scholars in the past and you read about their lives. Honestly, I mean, I've read about some of them and I cannot understand how a human being can live his life learning to that extent. But people who understood this message, they really devoted their lives to learning, because without knowledge, without ilm, what's the difference between you and an animal? We all eat, drink, sleep, mate, defecate, urinate. The difference happens when you learn, and you learn about your Lord, and you recognize Him, and you worship Him. Without knowledge, you are just, going to be an average person like anybody else. So it's the knowledge that will make you distinct. It will make you stand out. And Allah says that in the Quran, right? He says that is the one who knows like the one who does not know? They are not the same. For example, Imam Bukhari, he memorized 250,000 ahadith. If you look at Imam Shafi'i, do you know what he used to do? When he would read a book, he would say, I cover one page when I read a book. Because he said, if I don't cover it, I will memorize both the pages immediately, and then they will all get mixed up in my head. So to stop himself from the temptation of reading everything at the same time, he would cover it, read one, memorize it, and then he would uncover it. This was their enthusiasm to learn. That's why they are like, the stars of the ummah today. Imam Shafi'i, we remember him until today. Why? There's obviously something outstanding about these people. There's a book that I used to teach back in the UK. It's called Aqidatul Wasitiyah. It basically talks about the creed or the Muslim belief. Do you know how it was written? Right now it's available in 2 or 3 volumes with an explanation. Because today, if we just read it without the explanation, we would probably be confused. But, the people at that time, they knew. Do you know how it was written? It was written by Ibn Taymiyyah. Okay, Aqidatul Wasitiyah. Remember this. It's written by Ibn Taymiyyah. And he wrote it between Dhuhr and Asr. And this is a book now that we spend months, if not years, studying. He just penned it together between Dhuhr and Asr. Do you know one of the top books written about the description of everything about the Prophet ﷺ? How he ate, how he slept, what he wore, about his wives, about his children, about his battles, everything about him is basically like his biography in detail. It's called Zadul Ma'ad, and it's written by a scholar called Ibn al-Qayyim. He was one of the students of Ibn Taymiyyah who wrote that book between Dhuhr and Asr, okay? Do you know that book is another gem? It's pretty much the best book written on this subject. And do you know what he said? He said, I wrote this during my travels. The man was not even resident while he's writing a book. While we are resident, we think, should I do this? Should I not do this? Do I have time for this? Do I not have time for this? Maybe I'll do it after the weekend. Maybe I'll do it after this break. These people, they didn't waste a moment. Traveling, time between 2 salahs. It was all like a treasure. Every second was a treasure. Because once it's gone, it will never come back. And whatever you earn during that time is what you will take with you to your grave. What else are we going to take? The coffin has got no pockets. We're not taking anything else with us. We're just taking our a'mal, which is how we spend our time. Every minute, every moment that you spend, you need to think. It's an amana. Allah has given it to you. With every passing second, basically, your life is being eroded by time, right? Now you have 1 minute less. Now you have 2 minutes less. Now you have 3 minutes. People get so happy when the weekend comes. I just think, oh my God, another week is gone. What did we do? What have we done for our akhirah? So, one of the things to obtain knowledge is you need to value time and you need to make use of it. If you read about the life of Imam Nawawi, amazing. Honestly, it's just mind-boggling. Do you know he would not eat regular food, so he does not have to spend time relieving himself. This is how conscientious they were about their time. We will happily spend half an hour in the bathroom because it's our personal library. We just think, okay, now I've got a break, now I'm just going to, take long showers and, spend hours and hours doing mindless things. And then we wonder, that I don't know about this, I don't know about that, I don't have enough time. I would never finish reading Sahih Bukhari. I will never get through Majmu' al-Fatawa. Ibn Taymiyyah, he wrote Majmu' al-Fatawa. It's like 40 volumes. The man, and that is just one of his works. If he had time to write it, and he didn't live for very long. It's not like he died when he was 200 years old. Imam Nawawi, he died very young. These people, they did not live for like hundreds of years. But their lives were full and fruitful, and they were, they had efficient lives, I think even if we lived 600 years, Allahu Alam, what we will answer to Allah for those 600 years. So, it is said about Imam Nawawi, he would fall asleep on his books, and then he would get up and he would continue, reading, writing, and you see that the sincerity with which they produce this work, that there is so much barakah in it. I don't know of any household which doesn't have 40 hadith that's written by Imam Nawawi. If you do something with honesty and sincerity, it goes a long, long way after you're gone. People will hold on to it, not because of people, but because Allah has put barakah in that action, because it was sincere. And any action that is insincere, no matter how much you decorate it and make it amazing and beautify it, it'll just fizzle out because there was no sincerity in it. And remember last time we were talking about amana and doing things with truthfulness and with sincerity, and that applies to all walks of life. With our kids at home, we have to be honest. We have to answer for these children. They are not ours to do with what we please. This is an amana that Allah has given us, and we have to answer to Allah one day for what we did with them. We are like looking after a flock that Allah has given us. And similarly, with our jobs, with our professions, with, for example, if you're a doctor, you have to be very honest and sincere with what you do. You have to do for them what you would have done for yourself, and not just, just try and, get rid of them or do the quickest thing that you can do, because then that is insincere. So, knowledge and learning is something extremely stressed in Islam. Now, was the Prophet ﷺ literate? No. After he received this revelation of Iqra, did he start going and saying, please can somebody teach me how to read and write? No. He stayed illiterate until the day he died. He could not write his name. When he would write letters to ministers, he would have a scribe who would write them. And he had a khatam, right? And he would put that on because he could not write his name. Why do you think it is important for us to learn to read and write, but he who is our example to follow, correct? He is uswatun hasana. That he is illiterate. Why do you think?
Because he acquired all the knowledge.
Sorry?
He got the knowledge from God. And then again, he fabricated it.
That is, sorry?
He will fabricate.
Yes, very good. So those are the two main points. Number one, if he was literate, right, and he came out from the mountains saying, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi, they're going to think, oh, he knows how to read and write. He just sat in the cave and he coined these words. They will never believe him. Never. No matter how many amazing verses he writes, they will just think he's some amazing poet, and he's coming up with these amazing. And that's what Allah says in the Quran, right? He says, okay, I can't find the ayah right now, but there is an ayah in the Quran where Allah says that, if you had been, literate, then they would have accused you and they would have said that, oh, this is just, because even though he was illiterate, they accused him. They said, oh, someone is teaching him these words and he's coming out with them. That's number one. Number two, what she said, that is he opening up books to learn his religion? No. He is learning directly from the source. Jibreel alayhi salam is coming and teaching him. Will it make any difference if he's literate? No. Because he is getting everything that he needs through revelation. So, for both these reasons, and out of the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he was illiterate and he remains illiterate. But for us, the command is different. We have to give attention to literacy, to learning, to knowledge, to any kind of scholarliness. Okay? And, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He swears. When He swears by something, that gives that thing extra importance. So Allah says, Noon wal qalami wa ma yasturun. He swears by the pen. Now, this is a very important thing. Similarly, if Allah says, Wattini was zaytun, by the fig and the olive. These things now have automatically become extra special because Allah has sworn by them. If Allah swears by anything, it takes it into another league. Okay? So, Allah has sworn by the pen. And so, any kind of literacy is very, very important. And for us, we are not being taught by Jibreel alayhi salam, or we're not getting wahi, right? The only way we can learn about our religion is by studying it. And how will we study it if we can't read or write? I remember, I was working in the infectious ward at some point long ago, and there was this young boy. He must have been in his late teens, maybe, or early 20s, and he had AIDS. He didn't look like he had very long, but it was very sad. He apparently had a history of being a pedophile, and he was Muslim. I just used to feel really, really sorry for him when I used to see him, And they had, obviously in the infectious ward, you can't just walk into the room and he can't walk out. They keep almost like cage them, And every time I would pass by, he would come to the front of the door. So I just thought, he doesn't have very long to live. Maybe he'll make istighfar, maybe he will think about Allah before he dies, and maybe Allah will forgive him. So I got some, these little brochures and booklets that they have, especially in Ramadan, they say 10 questions that women ask about Ramadan, or they say, what is the best way to make istighfar? They print these, they used to. Nowadays, I don't know if they still do, but, they have these little brochures. So I got a few that I thought were relevant to him, and I gave them to him. And he was really excited, and he took them, and then he just seemed really disappointed, and then he just put them aside. And then I came the following day, and he was just sitting really, sad in his room. And so I gave him some more booklets and some more books. And he was just, just sitting like this. And then I said to him, I said, look, read this, maybe you will learn something, And then he came up to me and he said to me, he said, I can't read. He said, I can't read, all right, I'm illiterate. And I felt really, really sorry for him. So then I in those days, I'm talking about like 20 years ago or more, we used to have audio cassettes. And so I went and I got him some audio cassettes. And I said to him, I said, okay, you can't read and write, so here you go, at least listen to this. And he kept saying to me, he said, I've made tawbah, I've made istighfar, I've made tawbah. But I'm just saying that one of our steps towards knowledge is literacy. So, it is important that we pursue knowledge. And the kind of knowledge we pursue is also very critical. So, for example, once the Prophet ﷺ, he saw Umar ibn al-Khattab reading some pages of the, I think it was either the Torah or the Injil. And he was very upset. And I think he took it away from him, or he told him not to read it. Until you are firm and firmly grounded in your own religion, you should not go and read things which are going to confuse you and which are going to lead you astray. So read something that you can handle. And, for example, especially in the West, unfortunately, the West has a more reading culture than the Muslim world. Like in the West, if you ever get into a bus or a train or a tram, people are always reading. They always have a book in their hands. But unfortunately, in the Muslim world, I've seen people, doing intelligent jobs. And when I pass by, they've got their phone in their hand, and I'm really hopeful that they're doing something really useful. And I pass by and they're playing some game. So, we're just like doing things which are killing our brains and which are killing our, our intelligence. But the books that people are reading in these buses and trams and trains, they're not always beneficial books. They're usually fiction, right? But what I'm encouraging you to do, and encouraging you to encourage your families to do, is encourage a healthy reading culture. Read something of benefit. I'm not saying that only read Islamic history or Islamic literature, but, for example, read about gut health, read about bringing up children, read about something useful, read about trees. There's a really interesting book about trees and how they communicate with each other. I mean, reflect on the creation of Allah, read something which will enhance your knowledge, which will, develop you in some way. Reading about some boy who fell in love with some girl and then they ran away and then one got run over by a train. And I mean, honestly, why would we encourage our kids to read something which is just going to kill their intelligence and their brain and their minds? It's not going to develop them. It's not going to, a lot of these kids, they think that, oh, it's so interesting to read this, and oh, this is so exciting, because this is just how shallow their minds have become, unfortunately. But we need to nudge them and encourage them. And there are some tips I will give you on how to encourage the reading culture within your house. Because let's say you are not an avid reader, at least try and nurture it into your children. Because perhaps our time has sort of gone now. You can still try, but if it has gone, at least try and nurture it in your children. So the first thing that will encourage your children to be readers, and inshallah be the next reading generation, is that they see their parents with books in their hands. Okay, unless children see their parents reading, they will not read. Monkey see, monkey do. I attended a really interesting thing once. It was about it was like a parenting course. It was not really from beginning to end very complicated or lengthy, but just something interesting that I picked up. I want everybody to do what I'm doing, okay? Can everybody put their hands on their chins? Everybody put their hand on their chin.
I already
Okay. So you see, I asked you to do what I am doing, right? And I put my hand on my face, but most people put their hand on their chin. Because you are, I saw some people with their hands on their cheeks. But what I'm saying is that when you see somebody doing something, you just automatically do that. Okay, you don't tend to think that, oh, they've asked me to do something different. So similarly, the way you behave is the way your children will behave. If they see you reading, then they will also go and pick up a book. Whereas nowadays, I've seen little children, they're sitting and pretending to play, and they're doing this. And I can just imagine, this is what they see their parents doing, so this is what they are doing.
I think we're now, I'm dealing with a lot of 7-year-olds, right? And believe me, I don't see a generation of a reading culture.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
So if you want to avert that, then do read. Because
my
believe me,
parents don't read.
I'm seeing a generation full of technology.
That's good, mashallah. They're probably encouraging you with some of the other tips.
Yeah,
Because there is nothing else for them to do.
Yeah.
there is no TV.
Exactly. So that's what I was saying to her, that's probably because of some of the other points that I have here. So that's the first thing, is that you set the right example. The second thing is that they should grow up in a print-rich environment. I have gone to homes where there is not a single bookshelf or a single book in the house. How is the child going to read when there aren't any books? The third thing is, let each child own their own library. So have a set of books and say, these are my books, and have another set of books and say to the child, these are your books, and these are her books, and these are his books. So each child feels that, okay, this is my library, and I can go anytime and pick up a book from here and read it. So, everybody likes to feel like they own something, that this is mine. And especially with children, they like to know that this is mine and that is hers. They like to make sure that there is a distinction, that there is no mix-up, that my books are not going to end up in her side. So let them own a library and feel that this is my section, and you will see, they will go, because they just feel that, oh, this is my section of books. I must go and take a book at least once and read it. Otherwise, it's going to be a shame that I have a library and I don't use it. The fourth thing is that you should visit a bookstore often. Let them go, select books, and guide them, encourage them to take something wholesome. If they go towards Agatha Christie, pull them away. Bring them to something which is a bit more wholesome. Something that will make more sense, and that will develop them, that will increase them in some way. And last, but very importantly, try to take away things like television and YouTube and computers. So if these things are all the gadgets are turned off, like she said, there is nothing for them to do.
Age 7, most of these kids already have whatever pod you can ever think of.
Oh my God.
iPod, iPad, iPhone 7, iPhone, whatever.
iPhone 7 is
Age 7. They already have it. They're even better than whatever you own. They're better you own. They have twice that. Not just one, iPhone 7, iPhone 8, iPhone whatever. I don't even know how it looks like.
You see, the thing is that when you watch something, it's the easiest thing to do, because you can just slump on a chair and tell you after the adhan, inshallah. So I was saying that, when you watch television, that's the easier thing to do. And that's why you're more inclined to doing that, because you're using less of your your body and your senses, and you're doing less work, because you can just slump on a cushion and just let your eyes just watch everything and take it in, which is why it destroys your intelligence and your brain eventually, because you don't exercise your brain. It's telling you everything. Whereas when you read a book, first of all, you have to use your muscles a little bit, because you would have to hold the book. Secondly, you're reading it, so you're using your eyes. Thirdly, when you read, you have to make a picture somewhere, So that's going to have to be part of your brain work, right? Your brain is going to have to work and imagine, okay, there was a man, he was tall, he was this, he was that, he went into a building which was, which had a black door with a big golden handle. Now you're starting to like put all these things in an image, right? Yeah, so you're using your brain, which is why it develops your imagination and it develops your mind. Whereas when you're watching something where you see the building and the door and the handle, you've just seen it. You haven't done any work for it. And that's why, this is the better thing to do for you to do for your child. I know the easiest thing is to use this, electrical babysitter and just say, here you go, kids. Here's an iPad, here's an iPhone, and I'll turn on the LCD for the third one, and you can just go and enjoy yourself. But what is that going to do? This is an amana that Allah has given you, your children, and you are basically going to churn out children who are, who have numb minds, who can't think to save themselves, who have no knowledge of the deen and no inclination to study about the deen, because you just become lazy. After a while, you become lazy. So after years and years of this kind of upbringing, do you think this child is now going to suddenly turn around and say, oh, I want to memorize Quran and I want to read about the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ? No. They're going to say, oh, get me a Disney cartoon and I'll watch the life of Muhammad ﷺ. So definitely, encourage your children to read and use some of these steps if you haven't already tried them. The last thing I want to talk about before Salah, inshallah, quickly, is the types of revelation that the Prophet ﷺ would receive. So the first revelation that the Prophet ﷺ received was where he saw the angel in his real form, in his true form. Do you know how many times he saw him in his true form? Twice. Yes, very good. He saw him twice in his real form.
Is hadith describing how he looks?
Yes.
Except the wings.
Yeah. About the wings, yeah.
No, not the wings, like the body.
No, it's just the description is mainly about his wings. So the first time he saw him in the cave. When is the second time he saw him? Sorry? No.
No, the hadith of Jibreel.
No. At that time he came in the form of a man. Yes. He saw him in the time of Mi'raj. And where was that? Allah says, وَلَقَدْ رَآهُ نَزْلَةً أُخْرَى عِنْدَ سِدْرَةِ الْمُنْتَهَى. He saw him in his true form at the last border when he went up the 7 heavens. He reached the 7th heaven, and over there he reached the Lot tree, which is the Sidrat al-Muntaha. And it is the last limit, beyond which is the throne of Allah and Jannah and Ghaib. Basically Ghaib, right, yeah. And he was not allowed to, go beyond that. And that's where he saw Jibreel alayhi salam in his true form again. Okay, so those are the 2 times he saw him in his true form. The first type of revelation is in the form of true dreams. So 6 months prior to prophethood, where the angel comes and says to him, Ya Muhammad anta Rasulullah, he has dreams. And every time he sees a dream, in the morning, that dream turns into reality. He sees those things actually happening. Then he sees another dream. Then he wakes up in the morning and that dream, factualizes. So even this is it makes him a bit confused, because it feels strange. Like even us, if you have a dream and you wake up in the morning and let's say you had a dream, you saw somebody stirring a pot wearing a black dress, and you wake up in the morning and you come downstairs and there's somebody in exactly that image, doing that. So you feel a bit like, oh my God, that's really freaking me out. I just saw that in my dream. So he saw that for 6 months. For 6 months he had true visions. For us, it's a true dream. But for prophets and messengers, when they have a dream, it is basically wahi. That's why, for example, the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he saw in a dream that he's sacrificing Ismail alayhi salam, right? And he went to Ismail alayhi salam and he said to him, he said, I had a dream and I saw him slaughtering you. And he said that, if al-ma tu'mar, right? He said, do what you have been commanded. Because through that dream, he's being commanded to do this. So for prophets, it is revelation, it is a command from Allah. Similarly, the Prophet ﷺ, he sees Aisha radiallahu anha in his dream and he marries her. But for us, we have 3 types of dreams, according to the scholars. One is a true dream, which is from Allah, which is good, which is when you see something really amazing, or you see something good, or you see something in your dream, and in the morning, it actually happens. And you think, oh my God, that's from Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ said that a true vision or a true dream is a 46th part of prophethood. And it's interesting that he used the number 46th part of prophethood. Because if you take a ratio of the 6 months that he had true dreams, and you have his messengership lasted 23 years. If you take a ratio of the number of months in 23 years divided by 6, which is the 6 months where he had these dreams, you get the figure 46. Okay, so a true dream is a 46th part of prophethood.
What do they mean by that?
They just mean that it is something good from Allah, and for the messengers, of course, it is part of prophethood.
So there's like different types of.
Like I said, for the prophets, it is part of prophethood, because that is like a revelation, or it's like a precursor to receiving revelation. But for us, it's a true dream. Okay. The second thing we see is a dream from shaitan. So you will see something really disturbing, something really awful, something that really upsets you when you wake up, and you start feeling really like uneasy about it. This is from shaitan. He's just trying to scare you. He's trying to make you anxious. He's trying to worry you. He's trying to make you weak. Because remember, shaitan is very weak. He cannot do anything apart from scare us and whisper to us. That's all he can do. Those are his scare tactics. So ignore it. Say a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Blow and spit on your left side. If you want, do 2 rakahs, and don't talk about it to anyone. Don't mention it. And don't act upon it. Just leave it as if it did not even happen. It's just shaitan trying to scare you. The third type of dream that you would have is something that has been happening either in your life or throughout the day, and you've been thinking about it a lot. And then when you sleep, you see it because it's been on your mind so much, So you start seeing it because you're still thinking about it even in your sleep. So that is just like, it's neither here nor there. It's just something like that. And as for a true dream, even though, this is not our subject, but the Prophet ﷺ said that only tell your dreams to someone you love or trust. Don't mention your dreams in public or to everyone and anyone. There might be somebody who hates you, who has hasad towards you, and they might, feel something bad towards you, and it will have a bad effect on you. Remember when Yusuf alayhi salam, he saw a good dream. And what did his father say? He said, don't mention it to your siblings. And nowadays people say, this is your brother and you're hiding things from your sister. Yusuf alayhi salam had to hide something from his brothers and sisters. They hated him. So it is, between brothers and sisters, sometimes there is more enmity and hatred than between outsiders, right? So I might, for example, let's say I dislike someone. Okay, I just dislike them. But within their family, they will have somebody who hates them and who wants bad to happen to them. Within family politics, this can be awful. So don't mention your dreams, especially your good dreams, to anyone unless you love them or you trust them. Or let's say you want to know what the dream means, go to someone that you trust, that will not go and tell anyone and who will not react in a bad way. Okay, coming back to the revelation. So the first type of revelation, there are 7 types. of revelation that the Prophet ﷺ would receive. So the first is true dreams, true visions. The second type is when the angel would inspire the Prophet ﷺ, but he would not appear in front of him in any form. Okay? He would just sort of like, get the revelation. When I say revelation, it's almost like it comes in his mind, or it's in his head now. So once the Prophet ﷺ said, the noble spirit revealed to me, no soul will perish until it exhausts its due course. So fear Allah and gently request Him. Never get so impatient to the words of disobedience of Allah. What Allah has can never be acquired except through obedience to Him. And this is sort of like where the Prophet ﷺ is encouraging people not to ask for death. Like sometimes you reach a point where your life becomes so difficult and you say, Allah, just give me death. You should not do that. Okay, you should just ask Allah politely for khair. Ask Him for good. But, or maybe if you have come to the point where, you are really, really frustrated, say, take me when it is good for me. But don't say to Allah that, I want death. You should not ask that. So this was an example where a wahi just comes to him, but he does not see Jibreel alayhi salam, and he does not experience anything apart from just the words. Okay, that's the second type. The third type is when the angel comes in human form, and the best example of that is, number one, when he came at the cave, because when he came to him at the cave, he came in the form of a man, right? The Prophet ﷺ just saw a man at the door of the cave. And the second best example of that is the hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, where he came in the form of a man, and they said that, he had white clothes and dark hair, and nobody had ever seen him before, and he didn't have the traces of journey on him. And he always, when he comes in the form of a man, like I said, he comes in a very beautiful and handsome form. The fourth type was the most difficult type, is when the angel would come to him like the toll of a bell. So he would hear a sound of a bell, like a bell is ringing, and he would feel the weight. Now, this sound of a bell, the scholars have explained, is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives His revelation to the angels to take it. When Allah gives a message to the angels to take it to the Prophet ﷺ, they are so overwhelmed that Allah has given them a message, they start flapping their wings really fast. And the sound that those wings make is like a metal chain being dragged on rocks. Can you imagine that sound? It's almost a painful sound. Imagine if you have some heavy metal that you're dragging on the rocks, right? That's the sound their wings make when they are moving very fast. And he would hear the sound, and then the weight of the revelation would come on him. Now this weight is most likely the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Allah says in the Quran, Inna sanulqi alayka qawlan thaqila, right? That we are going to send down on you a heavy word. So the words of Allah are so heavy, if he was sitting on a camel, the camel would sit down. He would have to sit down, because the Prophet ﷺ is becoming heavy from the weight. Once he was sitting next to, I think it was Zayd bin Haritha. Yes, it was Zayd bin Haritha. He was sitting next to him. When you're sitting on the floor and you're very close to someone, his thigh was touching the knee of Zayd bin Haritha. And the wahi came to the Prophet ﷺ. Zayd bin Haritha said, I thought that the Prophet ﷺ was going to break my knee from the weight. That's how heavy his body became, and his weight went on to Zayd, and he felt like his knee is going to break. And these were tough men, mind you. If you go and see one of their swords, right, we would need about 3 of us to just lift that sword. And you will see later on in the Seerah when we study, In one of the battles, Khalid bin Walid, he said, I broke 8 of these swords. He broke 8 swords. I'm telling you, if you see one of those swords, right, breaking is like, it's not even something that we would consider. Just carrying it would be like, an effort for us. So we are talking about strong men here. And for them, this weight is so heavy that they feel like that their body is going to break.
In the Quran, it is mentioned like the way of waliya. What is new warai hijab? So it comes in this term or what kind of like?
I'm not sure which verse you're referring to because the
Surah
Ahzab?
Ashura. It's last verses.
Okay, I'll look at the verses while you're praying, inshallah, and then I'll get back to you, inshallah. Okay, and the 5th type is when the angel would appear in his original form. Like we said, that happened twice. And he had, 600 wings. And the final type is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would speak to the Prophet ﷺ directly without any intermediary. And that happened when? Mi'raj, yes. And what is the command that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him? The most important thing. Can't be stressed more. Allah delivered that message to him directly. Directly. This is what he said to him. And if you think about it, Salah has always had a majestic, Passover, you could say. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to who else? Did Allah speak to? Musa alayhi salam. The first time he speaks to Musa alayhi salam, what does he say to him? Wa aqimis salata li dhikri. That's the first thing he tells him, the first time he speaks to him. It's not something he reveals in the commands or through an angel, no. Direct. Salah is your connection with Allah. And that is the thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, gave to the Prophet ﷺ directly. And that's the last type of revelation that the Prophet ﷺ, in the types. So let's just go through these again. The first is true visions. Second?
True dreams. First is second inspiration. First is true dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Angel in true form, it just comes. Angels
Okay.
in human form, difficult time which the renderings are big, and speak directly.
Very good. Okay.
5 types.
7.
This is 5.
No. So it's true dreams. When the angel just gives the message without any appearance. The third is in the form of a man. The fourth is in his true form. The fifth is the bell. The sixth is directly. And the seventh is
Take your time.
okay, you guys come back inshallah and we'll tell you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Just a quick correction. I mentioned the story a little while ago about the orphans in Kahf. I think I said Dhul Qarnayn. I didn't mean Dhul Qarnayn, I meant Khidr. Okay, Khidr reconstructs the wall. The second thing I was going to say is that I'm 100% sure it was 7, but I counted again, it's 6 now. So if I find the 7th one, I will send it to Ravina. But right now it's just 6, the 6 that we counted, okay? True dreams, in his real form, in the form of a man, in the form of a bell, without appearing, just wahi, and direct communication with Allah. Okay, 6. All right. So I just wanted to, on request, just mention something about the siwak. So, salah, like I mentioned to you last time, that this is such an important thing that you are doing. This is your connection and your link with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And, it is encouraged that you prepare for this meeting. Okay, it's almost like a meeting with Allah. So you try and get ready for it. So you should wear nice clothes. You should smell nice. You should be clean. Your mouth and your breath should smell nice. Everything is connected. It's not a disconnected thing.
We're smelling like onions all the time.
Oh my God, tell me about it. Astaghfirullah. That's why it's good. Some people, what they used to do is they would keep a separate garment for salah. So, you can perfume that. You can keep it separate, away from your kitchen and cooker, so that you're not smelling of onions and garlic. And, one of the reasons why smell is so important from the mouth as well as from yourself is because the angels don't like bad smells. It makes them run away. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he would never eat onions and garlics, because he used to say that I speak to angels. I cannot do that, because if he eats something like that, they will not come to speak to him. And he has constant, communication with the angels. So he would not go close to it. But for us, at least we should respect the fact that, we are standing in Allah's presence. And that basically, salah is a meeting between you and Allah, where you're speaking to Allah, right? Like they say that if you want to speak to Allah, then pray. And if you want Allah to speak to you, then recite Quran, right? Because that's how Allah is speaking to you. And when you want to speak to Allah, because when you recite Fatiha, it is basically split into two. The first half of Fatiha is for Allah, and the last half is for us, right? In the first half, we glorify Allah, we praise Him, we sanctify Him. And in the last half, we ask Allah for our needs. And Allah responds to every part of Fatiha that we recite, right? Say, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Allah says, my servant has praised me. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Allah says, my servant has glorified me. Maliki Yawmiddin, Majjadani Abdi. So every part, Allah responds. And it's good for you to go back and, find somewhere where Fatiha has been explained like that, so that when you stand next in Salah and read it, you can imagine or think that I'm saying this and Allah is responding to me. So that will help you with your khushu and your concentration, and it will also make it a more two-sided conversation, rather than just Allah is responding and you're in your own world, just rattling off the verses. So think about it when you recite it. Think about it when you say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. Give it some time, give it some importance. Don't just, rush through it. So, what? In your clothes? Okay, just go and wait outside, okay? Wait near the bathroom. Go on. Fatima, go and wait outside. Maryam, why is he here? Okay, no, just leave him now. If he troubles everybody, then just take him out. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you some basic things about cleaning your mouth with the siwak. And mashallah, the sister who's given these out, Allah will reward her for, all of us going back to the sunnah, inshallah. But this is really a neglected and forgotten sunnah. People either are too lazy or just too busy, and they're just too happy with their electronic toothbrushes. Ibrahim, sit down.
I think he wants it.
I don't know what he wants. Okay, so the scholars have said that it is all right if you use the toothbrush, the regular toothbrush and the toothpaste to brush your teeth. But, like I said to you, when I was explaining to you about the ghusl, in those days they didn't have soap. So they would hit their hands on the sand, on the dust, to clean their hands after they have cleaned their private area. Because after you've cleaned your private area, you can't put that same hand into your mouth or something, right? You need to clean it first. Now we have soap, right? But still, just to stick to the sunnah, to do what the Prophet ﷺ did, it has its own pleasure and its own I don't know how to translate ladha in English, but it has its own flavor. You can't match that, So that's why I say just, hit your hands on the wall just to do what the Prophet ﷺ did. It's just out of love for him, out of admiration for him. And, of course, wanting the reward of following the sunnah. So, yes, you can use the toothbrush, but the siwak, you can't replace that. And also the scholars said that this is from a tree called al-arak. But if you don't get a stick from arak, you can use any stick or any twig from a safe tree, a safe plant, which will still do the same job. However, obviously the arak tree is the original, siwak. And you just have to make sure that you don't use anything that's harmful or that's going to, harm you in any way. The Prophet ﷺ said, siwak cleanses the mouth and pleases the Lord. So if you think about it, one of the main hadith about siwak, it does not really mention, Maryam, I hope he's not going out. It does not really mention that you have to use it just before salah or you have to use it at this time or that time. It generally says that it cleans the mouth and it pleases Allah. Right? So you can really just keep it with you all the time and just clean your mouth with it all the time. And, if you think about it, this is a more practical tool than a toothbrush and a toothpaste. I've seen some people who are doing night shifts and things like that in the hospital, and they've got their toothpaste and their toothbrush and they're vigorously brushing and spitting out all this toothpaste into the sink. And I mean, it's a bit disturbing to see somebody else in a public area, brushing their teeth. It's not a very pleasant sight. Whereas if you have a siwak, you can just quietly clean your teeth, go and just rinse your mouth without any white foam, flying out of your mouth and flying everywhere else. So it is definitely more practical. Of course, the scholars have mentioned some places where it is highly recommended to use the siwak, such as while you're making wudu or before salah. The Prophet ﷺ, he would use the siwak as soon as he would enter his house, so that when he greets his family, speaks to them, or if he approaches his wives, that there is not an unpleasant smell from his mouth. He was very, very conscious about smell, the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ said, were it not for the fact that I did not want to make things too hard for my ummah, I would have commanded them to use the siwak at every time of prayer. He would have made it fard. But he did not want to make, things difficult for us. Okay. Now, some people think that while you're fasting you can't use the siwak, whereas that is not true. The only thing the scholars have said is don't use something like this. This is fragranced with lemon flavor, so don't use a flavored siwak. But you can use a original non-flavored siwak. And of course, brushing your teeth as well does not break your fast. Okay, just try not to swallow the toothpaste. Okay. Okay. The best type of siwak is of medium length and thickness, and it should not be thicker than your little finger. So if you see the width of your little finger, it should not be much thicker than that. Even this thickness, I think, is all right. But usually, something about this thickness is good. It should not have knots in it. Some twigs have parts of the twig is deformed or it's knotted. It should not have any knots. It should be more or less straight. And it should not be very soft, that it doesn't clean the teeth, because if it's very soft, it's not going to do much. And if it's very coarse and hard, it's going to make your gums bleed. So it should not be very dry and it should not be very moist. It should be just right, just in the middle. The other thing is that when you
use it long enough, you'll know when it's just the right
yeah
texture for you.
yeah the other thing is that the scholars said it's better to clean your teeth side to side by moving the siwak side to side rather than up and down, because they said if you move it up and down, you could injure your gums, or you could make your gums recede by pushing the gums up too much. So they said do it side to side. Yeah, and that will of course, if you want to clean between your teeth and something is stuck, you're not going to get it out side to side. So just be careful in removing things between your teeth if you need to, but generally try to clean the actual tooth by moving it side to side. Yeah. Once the siwak has been used and you have cleaned your teeth, you should wash it, because obviously there is going to be bacteria or mucus or things like that are saliva and things like that are stuck on the siwak, and you should take them off. And the Prophet ﷺ, he would use a siwak, he would give it to Aisha radiallahu anha and tell her to clean it. So she said I would take it and I would first clean my teeth with it, and then she would go and wash it and she would give it back to him. I mean, they were mad about the Prophet ﷺ. If he would make wudu, they would run to catch the water, that is coming off his body. So okay. There is a difference of opinion. Should you use your right hand? Because when the Prophet ﷺ would do things, he would usually use his right hand to do something good. But then some of the scholars said, but you're taking out dirt from your mouth, so you use your left hand. So it's a bit of a controversial issue. The point being that people were not able to really come to a conclusion. So eventually I think the scholars agreed that if you are using the siwak with the intention of following the sunnah, then just use your right hand. But if you are using the siwak to clean your teeth and to remove dirt from it, then use your left hand. But really, if you did either or, inshallah, it's okay. There's nothing specified, okay, that you should use the right or the left. Okay.
Do we need to keep trimming it?
Yes, so after a while, you're going to notice that the bristles are not doing what they should be doing. So then you just remove them, preferably with a scissor, and then you go on to the next part of the siwak until eventually, it finishes, and then you get another one. And it is not acceptable to substitute this for a finger and, just say, I'm just doing what the Prophet ﷺ said. I mean, people do some weird things, but that is not acceptable, okay? And yeah, that's it really about the siwak. So inshallah, may Allah reward you for trying to follow the sunnah. I mean, if you're not using it throughout the day, at least try and make it a habit to use it before you make wudu. If you already have wudu for salah, sometimes you have the same wudu from Dhuhr to Isha. If you're really like me and not drinking enough water, then you at least just clean your teeth before every salah, and just follow the sunnah. Sorry. So yes, and then eventually when you start seeing the benefits and enjoying it, maybe you will just keep one with you all the time, and throughout the day you can just clean your teeth, and just your breath will smell good, and inshallah it will be your dentist will complain less when you go to see them for the next hygienist appointment, inshallah. Wa subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.
وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.